So thank you again for joining us for Writing a Strong Fundraising Letter. I'm excited that we are partnering again with George Myers. He is a consultant who has a great background with nonprofits, as well as had been on staff with Habitat International for years. Many of you might have been on some of his calls that he has done in the past for us or met him at previous Camp Colorados. So we are just grateful that he is with us to be able to share his expertise. So I'm going to turn it over to George.
Thanks so much, Karen. I'm hoping everybody can hear me. If you can't, please do let us know through the chat box so we make sure that you have a great experience here today. I'm really honored to be working with this. I live out in Sisters, Oregon, and so I just had breakfast, so I haven't had lunch yet. But the key to what I've been doing lately is working a lot still with Habitat organizations, even though I'm no longer employed by Habitat International, and particularly with my local Habitat here and some of the state support organizations out here in Oregon. So I still have my fingers into Habitat a great deal, as well as doing some other nonprofit consulting work. And Karen and I, we were just chatting before the call. We actually we're down in Americus, Georgia, Habitat's headquarters home about 20 years ago when she was an AmeriCorps and I was a volunteer. So it's great to still be connected with Habitat Colorado and all the great work you guys are doing. So today we're going to talk about fundraising letters, but I'm going to tell you right now it's going to take a little while to get to that fundraising letter because there's so much more to this process than the simple letter, with probably the most important thing of how do we make sure your donors open a letter they receive from you and then make a decision to donate. And I'm going to gear most of this towards the idea that this is the end of the year as we come to year-end fundraising, and we'll talk about that again. So by the end of the time, hopefully you'll learn the elements of a great direct mailing piece, who you send to, what gets open, why people will donate, and be prepared for that year-end campaign, particularly as we think about creating timeline strategies and online donation strategies. We'll talk about who do we spend money on when we ask for money, and why do we invest in direct mail. And again, will people even get to the point of reading your letter? Then we'll be talking about what do we say and how will we make sure that they'll donate to us and can donate easily and say thank you. And we should have some time for some questions at the end. So of course the big question we always start out with is, why does everyone do a year-end campaign? And the basic answer to that is it's pretty darn effective. It works well. And we'll look at some statistics to back that up. Some of you may do other mailings during the year. Some of you may find that you get donations. I know my local Habitat affiliate here does a nice annual report they mail out to their mailing list in the spring, early in the year, February, March. They'll mail that out, and they don't ever put a donation envelope in there, but they very often get some pretty nice checks back just because people are wanting to support Habitat. And Habitat has a long, long history and success with direct mail. Millard Fuller earned his money before he started Habitat with a lot of direct mail work, and when he did start Habitat and founded it, felt that direct mail was a great way to continue to raise money for Habitat for Humanity International. And people, and many experts in the field told them that he was doing too much and he should cut down and slow down and not spend so much money, and he never did because he felt it always worked. Habitat International did sort of turn away from a lot of direct mail, although they never gave it up completely, and it now does seem like they've started to pick it back up again. I was speaking with two women this weekend who well, at least they couldn't remember that they'd ever donated to Habitat for Humanity International, but had both just received a mailing from them. So that's the basic reason, is direct mail works, and it works really well at the end of the year. So isn't fundraising harder now? Well, when we look at this, this is from the Giving USA Report 2018, and the big thing that we see is the recession did definitely affect giving. But since then, total giving and philanthropy in the U.S. has continued to go up, where last year over $400 billion was given in philanthropic causes in the U.S. Per capita giving in the U.S. has increased to about $1,100 per person, and when we look at household giving, it rose to $2,271. Now, this does have to be somewhat qualified. We do know that there are many, many more nonprofit organizations. Probably since the mid-90s, the number of nonprofits has doubled, and particularly in the last few years, government funding has been cut for many programs. So there's more nonprofits looking at the general philanthropic giving resources, and that has impacted. So it is a little bit harder now. We do say, well, why do we even ask individuals? Why would we mail an individual a letter? And basically, it's because they continue to give the highest percentage of contributions. So of that $410 billion we looked at, 70% of it is coming from individual givers. Foundations, you can see, are pretty so much the next largest, the bequests and corporations. So the next time someone says to you, you should just write a grant or just go down the street and ask the biggest employer in town to give you some money, you can see really this chart always tells me, and this doesn't change. This pretty much every single year that we look at this number, this pretty much stays the same. One thing again, just to qualify some of this, is most individuals do support religion or their faith community as their highest individual giving. That's about 31% of the giving goes to that. And that had dropped, though, but it is increasing a little bit more. Education is the second bucket at about 14% and going up. And then the human services bucket that they use, which includes Habitat for Humanity, is about 13%. But that rose actually 5% in total giving last year. So again, this is where we want to go for fundraising. Some of you may have been introduced to the Indiana University School of Philanthropy, the Lilly Family School of Philanthropy as it's now called. And they do offer great training courses. That's where I learned my fundraising chops. It's a benefit of Habitat for Humanity. And really comes down to three things here. You want to get a gift, repeat a gift, and then upgrade that gift. And direct mail can do all three of those things for you. So it's really trying to get donors in the habit of giving. And a lot of the information that I'm going to speak from actually comes from this Lilly School's annual campaign course. Direct mail is hard. It's not the most effective. Going out and still having lunch with someone and asking for a big gift is still the most effective way. But it does work, and it works well. It works best because you can connect with a large number of people, and typically it works really well if you are engaging with those people that are already engaged with you. So again, that's sort of the philosophy we're going to go on. We're going to get the gift, repeat the gift, and upgrade the gift. And pretty much the direct mailing that we'll be doing towards the year end, we'll be repeating gifts that you already have from donors already in your database, and then trying to get some of those to upgrade those gifts. So what are the benefits of direct mail? Again, dependable renewal of income, builds your individual donor base, communicates with major donors in a pretty effective way. You can use it to expand your constituency. You can do a little what they call prospecting or trying to find some new donors. And for sure, it's a great way, again, to upgrade and renew gifts from people who already are giving to you. Why do we do year-end giving, people will ask. That's because most people do most of their philanthropic giving at the end of the year. And again, these numbers are from 2015 from Network of Good, but they pretty much stay the same too. So about 30% of people's givings occurs in December, and this is really important to remember. About 11% of those gifts occur in the last 3 days of the year. And I know personally, from personal experience, I will often be sitting there on December 30th or December 31st, and I actually do try and track who I've donated to and how much money I've personally given away, and I set a goal of that at the beginning of each year. But I'll be sitting there on December 31st and trying to make some last-minute contributions. And so I want to make sure that I have the resources or envelopes available to mail some checks out, or that I can go on someone's website and just punch in my credit card number and make a donation. And again, I wanted to also point out, these are some interesting statistics at the bottom. So average gifts during the year is about $110. Giving Tuesday, which we'll talk about briefly, $142. And if you notice that on the very last day of the year, it's almost double. So I would again think about it as we do our direct mailing, and we'll talk a little bit about Giving Tuesday, but you'll notice that the average gift is really the highest on the last day of the year. So Karen, I'm going to pause for a minute and see, does anyone have any questions up to here? Or anything that surprised anybody?
So if you want to type your questions into the chat box, see if there's any that are coming up.
Okay, well, we'll plow ahead. Please do type something in there if you want. I hope that helped sort of just set some baselines on why this is important. So we'll now start moving into what do we do to start to get that strong fundraising letter out the door and into your donors' hands. The first thing that I recommend is to make a timeline. In the attachments to this call, there is a sample timeline from an organization I worked with here in Sisters last year, and it buckets things out as to what are the top levels, who's supposed to do it by, what was the start date, and the due date. We broke it also out into some of the other pieces about writing the letter, getting the letter printed, how the board would be involved. They did actually a match for their campaign, which we'll talk a little bit about. So they wanted to go out and actually interact directly with some major donors and do some donor visits. And then one of the things we worked on a lot with them was their website and really tuning it up so that they were really, really ready to take online donations in a way that they hadn't been previously. And we'll also hit on that on the way before we're done today. But the big thing is to figure out, when does this letter want to go out? Most people are shooting for around Thanksgiving. Again, I want you to think through this whole presentation about what happens in your home and your mailbox. When do you start seeing those letters? How do you handle the direct mail solicitations that you get? And we'll look at some of those examples later on here. But they really start pouring in right about Thanksgiving, and a lot of organizations will really try and hit that weekend just before Giving Tuesday or the very first week of December. You don't really want to be getting to the point of where you're mailing things out on December 20th. That's probably not going to be effective. So figure out when you want to have your mail drop and then work backwards for that. Think about, what is it that you're going to ask for? What is the need that you really are looking for? Most affiliates, in my experience, ask maybe 1 or 2 times a year. And it's important for you to really think about what is one element or theme to focus on. And to also maybe say, is there a special strategy like a match or a challenge that we want to have? And just remember always that we're doing this to meet the donor's needs, not our needs. The donor is hopefully wishing to make a gift. They want to make a gift to something that's important to them, and that's the most important piece. And if it aligns with what Habitat needs, bingo. So we really also want to spend some time, what is your budget going to be? How much money do you have to do this? Because that's going to impact the size of the mailing, potentially some of the costs of the mailing. Who needs to have input on this? What are we outsourcing? We'll look at some of this. And then are we going to be communicating to our audience ahead of time that this is coming up? And again, the timeline that I have, because particularly there was a match, they started using their social media channels to let people know to watch for their mailing and for a special opportunity. So that's going to be part of your timeline as we go forward. But I really want you to think about as we do the timeline and work together on who needs to be involved and what needs to happen, is just really think that the writing is very important and the design is very important. And when we talk about donor segmentation, that's probably the third real important element. And we're going to talk about segmentation right now. So remind me again what a CRM is. Probably some of you out there are using Keystone for More Than Data, but it means basically your customer relation management system. It's just also, you could call it your donor database. And the power of the database that you're using, and Keystone does a pretty good job of this, is going to help you here to figure out how do you segment or decide who gets mailed and approached in a different way. We want to hope that your database has good data, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. We want to hope that your addresses are up to date, that you're not mailing to people who have been dead for 5 years, and you've got everybody's name spelled right. And hopefully you've probably also gone through and deduped your mailing list. Again, I know there's one organization that every time they mail to me, I get two mailings on the same day. They can't seem to figure out how to get my name in their database just once. Again, this is where knowing your budget is going to be important and who we are going to ask. So a really basic segmentation strategy, if you think about it, if you decide that you've got 1,000 names in your donor database that you want to try and mail out to this year, that you're going to do 1,000 letters, probably 10% of those or 100 of them would be towards your best givers, your highest givers, your major donors. The next one will be donors that you're trying to upgrade, about 20%, with 70% of the rest being a base donor. The people who we're going to upgrade are people who we feel have either been consistent givers. They may not be up at that major donor segment yet, but we think that they're ready to make a little bit bigger gift, and we think that they're interested or have gotten involved with Habitat, or for some reason that about 200 of those people are people that we're going to see if we can nudge upwards, which again is one of those basic pieces of building an annual campaign. They might have been given for multiple years. You might just have a feeling that, oh, I know George, and he could really write a bigger check than he's writing. Let's make sure we ask him for that. Or that you've seen people who have increased their gifts over time without you asking them to do that, and now this year you're going to make a deliberate ask. So where we're going with this is then, how do we create a campaign that addresses all three of these? So you probably figured out already that we're not going to write one letter to all these audiences. And we will write one letter, but it probably will have some nuances and different approaches in different paragraphs. Some other possible segments you could look at, you could go back in your database and figure out, well, who used to give to us but didn't give last year? Or who used to give to us? You could look for a donor who's given substantial amounts, say $500 over their history, but they haven't given recently. And maybe figure out, is this the year that we're going to approach them? Are there segments for people who are new, who just joined your mailing list this year? Are there volunteers that you've never mailed to? In my local affiliate here, that was one of their big changes, was to take the people in their database who were volunteers but not donors and make an appeal just to them. Were there other prospects out there? One other segment that I see a lot of affiliates use is it's pretty easy to go out and get hold of a property tax list or mailing labels or information from your county and your tax assessors. And people will screen these to say everybody that owns a house or everybody that owns a house that's valued at over $250,000, everyone that's in our school district. There are various ways to get a list without paying a direct mail marketing company to create a list of prospects for you. You probably don't want to use this as necessarily the time of year to go out and do large-scale prospecting. But if you have the budget, you might. But it's probably worth thinking about, if you have the budget to do it, to go and expend a little bit extra. Again, most of what we'll find in direct mail is pretty successful response rates if we're mailing to people who already are in our databases and we know are already supporting us. We'll have a smaller response rate of people who have never given to us but who we're approaching for the first time. Or maybe it's second or third time, but we're approaching them again and trying to convert them into a donor. So those are some good ideas. They're not seeing any questions. Karen, are there any questions about segmentation before we move on? Okay. Well, we'll think about our major donors. And I do have a question for you. What are the techniques that you use to personalize an ask to your big or best givers at the end of the year? I'm curious what people are doing. And you can either type these in, or Karen, maybe we can unmute and see if anybody's got anything to say.
The conference has been unmuted.
So how do you approach your major donors at the end of the year?
So I did unmute the line if anybody would like to share.
Maybe nobody has major donors. I hope so. Anyone have anything to share out there? Okay, well, I'll give you my answers. Thanks, Karen. So some of the things that I see people do is, even if you've, they will still get a letter. I think that's number one thing. They will still get your letter, especially if you've been doing social media stuff or putting things in your weekly newsletters or monthly newsletters to watch for your year-end mailing. So they know there's a letter coming out, hopefully, and you don't want to not send them a letter. But one of the things you could do is make sure that their letters are all hand addressed with first-class stamps on them. You could also try hand delivering their letter to them. You could have someone that they know, or one of your board members that knows them, write a personal note to include in the letter. You could spend a little bit of time and energy on having people make some phone calls. And maybe if that 100 donors we talked about, maybe you only do it to the top 25. Make some phone calls or even some visits. So those are some ways to make a major donor feel special. This is a great time to have your board of directors help. I see a lot of boards that have either a letter signing party in November before the mailing is going to go out. This means, of course, you've got to have them all printed up for them to do this. And, you can have them write notes on letters for people that they know. You can have people just scrawl a little note in the margin of your letter just saying, hey, let's do this. So again, this is probably going to be a segment unto its own of the board, who the board knows and who's going to work with those. So probably be pulling those out of your stack. It's a great opportunity for your board members to possibly think of some other people, so you want to have some blank ones around so they can write the address on it. One tip would be, don't let the board members leave with the mailing. Make sure they sit there and do it right then. Otherwise, I can guarantee you, you're going to have a bunch of letters that are going to disappear, and you're going to, if you're lucky to chase them down, that's not what you need to be spending your time on. So have them sit in the room and do it. Maybe spend asking to challenge them to spend an hour doing this or even 30 minutes. And they can also be a big help for realizing who a challenge grant. I saw a board last year that put out a challenge. So their challenge was like if they could get, they matched up to like $1,000 towards new donors who had come in, and that was part of the solicitation letter. So we're going to move on to what this actually looks like. We will get to the letter. We're halfway through here. Hopefully we'll have some time for some questions at the end. But the 4 key elements of a direct mail piece are: what does the postage look like? What does the carrier envelope or the envelope that it comes in look like? What else is inside that envelope besides a letter? And then what does the letter itself say? One of the things that we're going to talk through about this is this is a place to think about spending some money on outsourcing some help with your mailing. You want to make sure that your letters look professional, that they didn't just come out of your laser printer at your office. You want to be able to, unless you've got someone very sophisticated in your office or one of those really big high-buck CRMs or databases, you want to have some mail merges going on. Excuse me. And you might want people helping you assembling this. We'll talk a little bit more about that, as well as sorting and mailing it. Again, if we think about that we are going to segment, we will have, even though it's going to be one mailing with probably some of the same inserts and things, there will be the need to segment and personalize some of these in a way. You probably have some local printers who can do a great job of that. I know, again, my local folks here in Sisters just went down to a new printer this month to talk to them about how they're going to help them with that and get some pricing on it. So, and that's helping them determine their budget. So it all comes together. But I would suggest you try and keep it local. It makes it a lot easier. It makes sure things get postmarked with a local postmark. And it does also just support your local economy. So what we really want is, at the end of the day, that when you get back your envelope, you've got this rather than this happening in your affiliate. So the first question, probably one of the most important things to be thinking about, is this carrier envelope, or the envelope that the letter gets mailed in. What will it look like? Indiana University will tell you, and backed up by other places I've seen, a donor will decide in 2 seconds when they're sitting there going through their pile of mail at the end of the day whether to open your letter or not and put it in, hopefully, the recycling bin at least. Can they look at the envelope and recognize that it's an organization they already support? Maybe they've heard of Habitat and are interested, and that will make them open the letter. Or is there something else about it that will catch their eye? Habitat logo is really recognizable and probably will help get your envelope opened. First-class stamps are best and will get the best response. But, probably for that 70% in there, we're going to probably use your bulk mail permits for specific segments, and they'll be laser addressed or possibly even hand addressed. You don't want to use a window envelope. It shouldn't look like a bill. And sometimes people will put those return addresses on the back for more room on the front. So again, just really remember that you've got 2 seconds for someone to decide to do that. Graphics, colors, sizes are all important to that. You might also, as you think about designing it, and if depending on how good you feel the data in your database is pay for that return mail service, so that if your letter doesn't make it to where you think it's going to go, you get it back and you can correct your correct the address and maybe even resend it, and for sure get the correct address for the donor in your database. So again, 2 seconds. That's what you've got. I'm going to show you a bunch of things that have been sent to me, and we'll talk about these. As you can see, this is a very colorful, attractive envelope. and it tells me there's a gift inside from the kids at St. Jude. And the back side of the envelopes is trying to get me to convince $10 to help save a child's life. So that's a pretty compelling message right there on the front of the envelope to try and get me to open their envelope and see what's inside. This one's a mystery. It came to me, but it's again telling me that I can make one gift. I can save a child's life with it. And if I do, they'll never ask me for another donation again. So I can decide whether I want to open that one or not. You guys all know where I live now, too. This one comes out. It's kind of funny. American Heart Association sends me one of these about every 2 to 3 months. I get another one. They all say Sisters Annual Appeal, but again, so that's been personalized, even though they're being mailed from all over the country. This is specific to sisters. And again, they've even personalized the front of the envelope. We need your help to reach our annual appeal. And what we'll often see is there's a teaser in here that there's gifts inside for me. So this one seems, even though it's not, it seems very personalized and it seems very localized. And remember, I want to show you the back of their envelope too. So even though this came out of Dallas, Texas to Sisters, Oregon, this is some of the other information that they put on the envelope so that even if I didn't open it, I'd get a chance to look at what heart attacks or stroke warning signs are. So they're educating me even if they're outside of the envelope. Here's another mystery sender. The reason I picked this one out is it looks how it's hand addressed. It's not, but it looks like somebody sat down and hand wrote my address on it. But it's totally a mystery. There was nothing on the back to tell me where this one was from. Then we got Doctors Without Borders. So a couple things about this one that's interesting to me. First off, they're using window, so it does kind of look like a bill. The second thing is I'm actually divorced. I've been divorced about 3 years, but I'm still getting mailings from them to Mr. and Mrs. Myers. And my former wife was actually the person who always gave money to them, but somehow they've tracked me down because I didn't live in Oregon when I was married. So they did one of those return services, figured out where I lived, and continued to send me mailings. I can tell you these never get opened. So, but nonetheless, they're trying. But again, this is very clear. Again, it's personalized, and it's very clear about who this is, and hopefully to try and get me to open the letter. I wanted to throw this one in just because it caught my eye. It didn't scan real well, but this is one of those laser holographic envelopes. So you just pick it up and it just sort of catches your eye just because it's flashing all these colors at you. So direct mail, of course, is not just for charities. We get direct mail from a lot of organizations all the time. And this one, again, it looks kind of like a bill, but they're trying to do their best to tell me that it's not a bill, that they're actually trying to get me and again, turning the envelope over tells me all the reasons why I should open it up and find out about their credit card. So part of what as we leave this section about what the envelopes look like, it's very much all these mailings are doing the best they can do to make me want to open the envelope. And we'll go back to the same piece that people who already know you, your envelope needs to look like it's from Habitat and look as appealing and as personalized as possible so that donor will at least open it up to get to where we can read your fundraising letter and hopefully decide to make a donation. So this is a really important piece to spend some time on. And again, there's experts out there. Your printers can probably help you. So what else is inside? The real basic one is we're going to have your fundraising letter and a return envelope. Keeping it simple, less is more, make it easy. When you open it up, and again, this is where mail houses can really help you, and good printers and can really help you. It should be really clear how it all comes together. So as you pull out the letter, does the envelope come first? Is there something else that comes out? It's sort of what they call in the business handling and opening. When you open that envelope, what's inside and how does it come out? The pieces should work together. Graphics and coordinated elements reinforce your message. Two colors, fine. This is not the time to send your brochure to people. That's one other piece. And, again, this is where technology can really help you. Most mail houses and good printers, even your local printing company, can probably do a lot for you. You may just have had them printing up your letters in the past. My local affiliate used to get the letters printed, used to get their envelopes printed, used to get their mailing labels. They do their own mailing labels. That's one other piece I didn't mention in the carrier envelope. This is not the time to print out a bunch of labels out of your database, adhesive labels, and slap them on crooked or whatever. That typically doesn't do nearly as good a job as a laser printed label. But anyways, the local affiliate would have this pile of return envelopes, a pile of letters, and pile of envelopes, and pile of labels, and pile of stamps, and then they would bring in volunteers and spend hours and hours and hours folding letters, stuffing letters, assembling letters, sealing letters, stamping letters, putting labels on letters, and sending them out. And trust me, there's many, many, many easier ways to do that. I worked with an organization last year who, again, was into folding and stuffing their own mailings. They they did multiple mailings a year, but they brought in volunteers, so they took staff time and volunteer time to bring in this group of very dedicated ladies who would come in 3-4 times a year and sit down and fold and assemble all their letters. It took them 5 to 6 hours, depending how big the mailing was. They bought them pizza, they bought them pop. We had a staff person sit in there with them the whole time. And when I was with them, I talked to a mail house, and we were able to do their folding, their inserting, and sealing of all the letters with the laser printing on them for about $40 more than what they had been paying previously to just get the printing done. So machines can work faster than volunteers in this case. Use your volunteers for something else, particularly as you're assembling your letter. So some of the things I found inside those other pieces, the Heart Association, the 2 free gifts. I also got a notepad with information on signs of a stroke, and of course those return address labels. We're always getting return address labels with that organization's logo on them. But I also got a certificate of appreciation. I hadn't even done anything, but they're telling me how much they appreciate me. So hopefully that does that. Finally, what about that letter? So Habitat, I would say back in that one, Habitat likes to give away stuffed animals. And it's an interesting piece. So the letter should be personalized. You could consider doing a pre-printed sheet with your logos and micro perforations if you're going to put your tear off at the end. You want your letters also as we segment. So, the major donor is going to get a slightly different paragraph or two in the letter. The upgrade donor is going to get a slightly different paragraph or two. The person who's never donated to you is going to get a slightly different letter. But the main body of the letter, the main content of the letter is important. If you have had, if the segment is a donor that's made to you before, I think we've all gotten those donation letters that say, "Dear George, thank you for sending us $25 last year. Would you consider a gift of $50 this year?" That's someone trying to upgrade me. And it's not that hard to merge those types of data into your letters. You want to always speak to the donor. You want to speak about the donor as to what you, the donor, are doing, and we are working with us. the Indiana school, this will sound a little sexist, always says to write with a retired woman in mind. That's your basic audience, a retired woman, and see what you can do to put that in their frame of mind. Some other things about letters. The best letters are not written by a committee. Go to your strongest writer in your organization. Maybe have someone proof it and give a little input, but you don't want your entire fundraising committee and the board of directors telling you what to write in the letter. Use the talent that you have. Again, we're written with a retired woman in mind. It can be as long as it needs to be, as long as you make your case and tell your story. Sign it by the board president, not the staff person, and the best letters always have a P.S. There should be one point only in the real letter. So actually, again, I sat down with the development director last month, and he said, you know, I sent this letter out last month, and I want you to look at it. And it was to some major donors. It was actually a major donor letter. It had only gone to about 80, 90 people of their top donors. And it was announcing, as I looked at the letter, I sort of went, Steve, you're telling them about 8 things in here. You're giving them information, you're communicating a change in your programming to them, you're thanking them for their past donations, but you know, it's like every single paragraph was a different bit of information, and it was only until about the 6th or 7th paragraph that he finally got around to saying that this is an appeal letter, not just an information letter, and asked them to send in some money. He said of the 80 letters that he'd sent out, he'd gotten 0 responses. And the biggest thing that I took away from that was that he had missed the mark, that he had not really kept it to a simple idea of how can you help us. The other whole piece of this is, as much as you want to be thanking people for past gifts and saying how great Habitat is in your community, you really want to be telling them what is it you're going to do next. Why do they need to donate to you now, November or December, and what are the great things you're going to do next year? So what is it that you're going to do with the money, not what did you do with the last. You might mention something happened from donations in the past and the great support that you had and the great year you had, but the real focus has to be, what are we going to do? And maybe it's, we're going to build Amanda's house next year, and you've got a picture of Amanda on there and Amanda's mom and dad. But you know, what is it that you're going to do to say, this is how your gift will impact the work that Habitat does? Probably some of you are aware that International is always looking for those great stories. They pay affiliates, I think it's $10,000, I could be wrong now, to give you your best story, because they don't have the stories. You, the affiliates, have the stories. And so if you can come up with that compelling Habitat story about what's going to happen to a family you've selected when you build a house for them and how it'll transform their lives, that's what appeals to the Habitat International donors. So you can keep that in mind. Just some other crazy things that they find that works better when people are looking at letters. Every paragraph's indented, no paragraphs more than 5 lines long. Each paragraph contains one thought. Bold italics photos are good, but use them sparingly. And again, it speaks to this segment audience. I'll tell you personally, none of this works on me. When I get those piles of letters at the end of the year, all it does for me is it reminds me of who I've supported in the past, who I want to support, and those letters will go in a pile, or I'll open it up and just take the envelope out, might glance at what they're saying, and put it aside, and all the other ones go straight to the recycle bin. There is some evidence, this doesn't mean to sound sexist, but there has been some research and evidence that men tend to look at pictures. They'll tend to pick out the bold print. They'll tend to pick out just the highlights. But women will read the words. So again, that's why we're in the actual content and body of the letter. The words are going to matter more to those retired women. But just realize that some of your donors, even though you'll agonize for hours over which words to pick out, many people probably will not read the letter and make a decision to donate to you or not. So just have that single theme. Make sure it is there. Don't neglect it, but don't stress over it. So as we wrap up here, I want to show you some letters. This is an interesting one. That was that St. Jude one. So this is all in one. There was the tear off the top and send it back in the envelope. Then the letter itself, you can see all the paragraphs are indented. This one says, Dear Friend. It would be nicer, since they've personalized everything else, if it said Dear G, or Dear George. And it has a P.S. And it's signed by Marlo Thomas. Probably some of you don't know who Marlo Thomas is anymore, but maybe some of you do. But she was a pretty famous actress for many years. And then the bottom half of it is my free address labels. So very short, simple letter. I would also pick on them. They do start their gift range at $10. I'm typically always going to tell Habitats to do more than that. The UNICEF letter, which was that mystery one about saving a child's life, again, if you just look at the format, this is to Mr. Myers. Very simple paragraphs, few bolded pieces. This is coming from the president and CEO, and also has a P.S. on the bottom. The Doctors Without Borders one, I opened it for you guys. It said, Dear Friend. This one went on for quite a while. So again, there's a big thank you at the top. I could just read this and get the gist of what else they're saying. The backside of the letter continues with what they're doing. Each paragraph is one idea. Each one is indented. This one I'll pick on too. They have it signed by their executive director rather than either a famous supporter or a board member. Here's the Heart Associations. Again, this one has a tear off at the top with a suggested gift amount circled. I would have circled one of the top or higher ones. And very simple again. This one's very personalized, G. Myers. A few bold pieces, and this one is signed by the chairman of the board. You remember that mystery one with the flag? So inside I had these two cards. This was part of the inserts from them. And it turned out it was from DirecTV. So kind of was a surprise to me when I opened it up. But again, my point of this is professional advertisers. Look at how this looks to you. They've got a real Post-it note stuck on the outside, offer me another $100 off. A lot of fine print, which I'm sure I'm not going to read because I'm much more interested in the Netflix and the $49 internet, which I can get without reading any of these pieces. But this is a very effective little piece for opening it up and going. The final area we're going to look at here quickly is the return envelope. This is how people get things back to you, this last element. So get lots of them printed. You can always use on them. You'll usually get, don't worry about having 5,000 of these sitting around your office. You'll always find a use for these. Make sure that they include a credit card option. You want to push online giving. Remember December 31st and whether you're going to be in your office. That's New Year's Eve. It's a Monday this year. You can always mention other things that are going on. And don't ever let somebody tell you that you need to put a stamp on the return envelope for them to turn it back into you. I would also, this is this Habitat one here too. I like this a lot. Starts out at $50, goes on up. It's easy to give by check, Visa, MasterCard. You can become a monthly donor. You can talk to them about estate planning. You can even send this back and say, I can't make a gift right now, but they're going to pray for Habitat. And contact me for volunteer opportunities. So they spend a lot of time working on this, but it works really, really well, and it really is an effective piece on this. Here's one other response card from another organization. Here they're really trying to get monthly donors going, but they will use a one-time gift and let you designate where it goes. And again, you can get here's how to give online, here's how to like us on Facebook and Instagram, and it works really well. Yes, I want to help. That's usually how it should start too. This one I'll pick on. You'll probably notice as you look at this. This one doesn't have anything about how to give electronically. They ask you for my email, but there's nothing else in here for that. I do like it though because it gets to that point of 1 day is $47, 1 week is $327. So it's a nice piece for this one. We're going to wrap up here still. I see a question in here about receiving a PowerPoint. Yep, I think I'm assuming Karen, we can get this downloaded to them. Some PSs. I'll see if I can come up with some of those. You know, one of the things I would do is start looking at your own mailbox. Start watching things. Feel free to ask other habitats what they're doing. I sign up for a lot of Habitat mailing lists just to sort of keep an eye on what some of the affiliates I like to support are doing, and it's always interesting to watch that. But take your postmaster to lunch, talk to them, make sure you're on the mailing list so you can see what your things look like and when they show up, and always test and track. I can pretty much guarantee you that you will at least cover your costs, if not do much, much more, so particularly as you're doing any prospecting. But look at those response rates, figure out your average gift, and the cost of each piece versus the return. I do want to hit the website quickly. I know I'm almost to the top of the hour here. You want to make it super easy to donate, as few clicks as possible. Make sure people feel comfortable and safe and secure. You can use PayPal just because it's well known. Be mobile friendly. Splash it on your landing page on your website, update it frequently, and make sure it's working all well on December 29th, 30th, and 31st. I really want you to think about how many particularly younger people out there, if you think about that donor return envelope, how many of them have checkbooks? How many of them write checks? How many of them know where a stamp is around their house or know where a mailbox is to go mail the letter? So online giving is really important. Increased 23% in 2017, 15% the year before, and 40% of your website traffic is now coming from mobile users. You want to make sure that you've looked at your website on your phone to see what it's going to do. Online giving is also growing, as is one-time offline giving. So make sure this is working. A little bit about Giving Tuesday. I'm sort of torn on this. I know places that it works really well. I know places that it's worked abysmally. So I think it's really going to be up to you whether you do it. I actually just saw 2 things come through my inbox this morning on Donor Perfect. If you want to follow up with them, it's promising to raise 3 times as much money as you raised last year from Giving Tuesday. That's what their online advertising was this morning. The Giving Tuesday website says they did raise $300 million last year. $120, I'm not sure that's as big as that year-end gift that we had. So it's a lot of work. It potentially cannibalizes people from giving on other days, and you just really are going to have to try it and decide for yourself. The last thing I'll say is don't forget to say thank you. I really want to thank you guys all to be doing this. And just respond as quickly as possible. Board members can make phone calls. I'm on a board of directors, and when that year-end mailing goes out, we are all given daily 5 to 6 or 5 to 10 donors that we need to just call and say thank you to. Homeowners can sign cards. You are competing with other nonprofits in how you're recognizing your donors, and you want them to remember you. So that's the end for me. I see a question in here. Composing a cold donation request letter to a local property owner who lives out of state. I think, so we actually have that dynamic here in Sisters all the time, and because there's a lot of second homes and vacation homes, and we find that appealing to them about what a lovely place this is to come and visit, but how many people here are struggling to make ends meet, and how if you can tell the stories of one of your families that you've selected, hopefully, who has been here and is living here and can't afford a second home, and what a difference Habitat's going to make to them, that would be great. You could also make an appeal that when they're around, that you'd be happy to give them a tour, you'd be happy to have them come down and volunteer or just meet the staff, and just see how you can engage them when they're locally there. I used to live in the upper Midwest, and we'd see, it was kind of funny, we'd get all these snowbirds would go down to Texas and build the habitat like crazy in the wintertime, and then come back to Minnesota, and they're like, oh, no, I don't do habitat up here. I only do it down there. So I think those people can be approached and convinced to donate and help you. So those are just a couple quick ideas. Here's how to get hold of me. I'd be happy to speak with any of you. I'd be happy to look at some of your letters. You want to shoot me a draft of your letter as you get closer to this, feel free to do that. And just see how that goes for you. Karen, I think I'm done.
Yes. Any other questions? I can unmute everyone.
The conference has been unmuted.
But I would definitely say, since George offered, that is a very generous offer. So if you have a letter and want to get some advice, he's willing to have you send that to him. We're also in our office open to that as well, too. So again, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it. We'll have some upcoming webinars next month, so I'll send out some indications about those. But thank you again to George and for sharing your expertise and wisdom on the subject. Have a great day,
Always
everybody.
happy to do that. Yeah, best wishes with your giving.
Thank you. Please stand by.